Devaya Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udire Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavat Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nashtiki. So we're continuing our description of how everything in this material creation comes from the body of the universal form, Purusha Shukta prayers. Teshu yagyasya pashava savanaspataya kusha idam cha deva yajanam kalaschuru gunanvitaha. For performing sacrificial ceremonies, one requires sacrificial ingredients such as flowers, leaves, and straw, along with the sacrificial altar and a suitable time, spring. What was the context? From his body. I had no ingredients. Oh, Brahma is saying I had no ingredients for sacrificial performances. Got it from the body of the Vishnu. Okay. Vastuni osadaya sneha rasaloha mrido jalam vichoyajum sri samani chaturhutram cha sattama. Other requirements are utensils, grains, clarified butter, honey, gold, earth, water, the Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, and Sama Veda, and 4 priests to perform the sacrifice. So this is the form of sacrifice offered using the yajna, the fire sacrifice. So many ingredients are needed, and it is practically impossible to gather those ingredients in today's day and age. And so Prabhupada is saying that the best yajna or sacrifice for today's day and age is chanting Krishna's names. Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama eva kevalam, Kalau nasti eva nasti eva nasti eva gatidannita. That there is no need for anything else. There is no need for butter, honey, gold, earth, water, the Rig Vedas. There's no, when something is said 3 times, then it's like confirmed. It's like a confirmed deal. So just to assure us that although we may read these descriptions, but this is sacrifice meant for some other age. It doesn't mean that we can't do that, but it's very difficult to pull it off. I was also thinking that, this also shows that in the scriptures, whether we're reading the Bhagavad Gita or we're reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, there are so many things mentioned. And just like, in a book of medicine, there are so many different system, treatments. Like I've, seen Charan Samhita, for example, and which is a treatise on Ayurveda. And when you look at it, you're like, okay, what does this even mean? How do you even apply this? But an expert Ayurvedic person in a proper lineage can tell you, okay, these are the parts that you need to focus on. Focus, because for that particular time and era. So same thing, when you read the scriptures, there's so many things being talked about. But we don't, even like in terms of renunciation, like why do you need a pillow? You can just use your hands as a pillow. And we read all those different levels of renunciation. What is a vanaprastha supposed to do? What is a sannyasi supposed to do? But we don't follow that as it is. Why is that? Because everything has to go through the proper channel of the acharyas who point out what is important to focus on at any given point in time. Yeah, and sacrifice is something that we can actually do it, right? If you can't do it, then there's no sacrifice. So it is always adjusted according to desha kala patra or time, place, time, and circumstances. Namadheyani mantrascha dakshinascha vratani cha devatanu kalpa sankalpastantramevacha. Other necessities include invoking the different names of the demigods by specific hymns and vows of recompense in accordance with the particular scripture for specific purposes and by specific processes. So again, these are the sacrifices mentioned in the Rig Veda, in the Yajur Veda, and Sama Vedas. And in the names of certain demigods are chanted, but again, they are considered as an agents of the Lord Vishnu, and all the offerings are ultimately going to Lord Vishnu only. But just like when the head is worshipped, all the different parts of the government are also offered that respect. So similarly here, you may see that there's so many prayers offered to the demigods in the Vedas, but ultimately they are all meant to be offered to Lord Vishnu, and the demigods are considered parts of Lord Vishnu, not independent.
Also, I think sometimes we may take our Krishna consciousness so much for granted. Because if we didn't have this Krishna consciousness, then this is the other thing that we have, which is that specific purpose, specific processes. These are the necessities. You have to invoke the names of the demigods, perform all these different rituals. And if you make a little mistake, then you're done for. And that's why in India, people actually carry so much fear around, ritualistic practices, because they know that if they make any little mistake, then it can be completely, not just that it'll be null and void, but one can even get a negative reaction. So Prabhupada is saying that that's why we have been given this simple process, which is unfortunate, because even this simple process is so difficult for the conditioned mind. We rebel, we resist, right? But in reality, what are we resisting?
Sometimes we see the simple process of chanting and then we think, or maybe this is too simple and maybe that's why it won't work. I want something more complex. And we offer something complex, then hey, this is too much for me. So the mind always finds an excuse not to engage in sacrifice. I guess the principle here is to realize that everything is coming from the Supreme and we're always dependent on Him. And the sacrifice is not to deprive ourselves, but the whole purpose of sacrifice is to connect with Krishna in love. That is the whole purpose of sacrifice. Gatayo matayaschaiva prayaschittam samarpanam purushavaya verete samhara samrita maya.
Thus I had to arrange all these necessary ingredients and paraphernalia of sacrifice from the personal bodily parts of the personality of Godhead. By invocation of the demigods' names, the ultimate goal, Vishnu, was gradually attained, and thus compensation and ultimate offering were complete.
So this purport is relevant. Prabhupada says, in this verse, special stress is given to the person of the Supreme Lord and not to his impersonal Brahmajyoti as being the source of all supplies. Narayan, the Supreme Lord, is the goal of sacrificial results, and therefore the Vedic hymns are ultimately meant for attaining this goal. Human life is thus made successful by pleasing Narayan and getting entrance into the direct association of Narayan in the spiritual kingdom of Vaikuntha. Iti samrita samhara purushavaya veraham tameva purusham yagyam tene vayajam ishwaram.
Thus I created the ingredients and paraphernalia for offering sacrifice out of the parts of the body of the Supreme Lord, the enjoyer of the sacrifice, and I performed the sacrifice to satisfy the Lord. Maybe we can just read one or two lines from here. People in general are always anxious to have peace of mind or peace in the world, but they do not know how to achieve such a standard of peace in the world. Such peace in the world is obtainable by performance of sacrifice and by practice of austerity. So here, Prabhupada, quotes this verse from the Bhagavad Gita, that how, this is the peace formula actually, that how when we can do everything for the satisfaction of Krishna and his devotees. And I really like what Prabhupada is saying. What is the meaning of sacrifice? That Brahma actually taught us what is the way of sacrifice. And the word sacrifice suggests dedication of one's own interest for satisfaction of a second person. That is the way of all activities.
It's not like something extra that I have, but when we sacrifice our own interest, time, energy, convenience,
for the satisfaction of a second person.
And Prabhupada says every man is engaged in sacrificing his interest for others, either in the form of family, society, community, country, or the entire human society. But perfection of such sacrifices is attained when they are performed for the sake of the Supreme Person, the Lord.
I was thinking, what is the opposite of sacrifice? The opposite of sacrifice is, selfishness, right? Because when sacrifice means giving up one's own interest for the satisfaction of the other, then the opposite of that would be, living a life which is just about me, right?
And even that requires sacrifice when we want to attain something for ourselves.
Yeah.
Even that requires so much sacrifice.
Right, but all that sacrifice is for my own.
For my own
good. Which is actually so counterintuitive, because no good has come out of just focusing on one's own good. Right? Never has happened, right? People try, and even after they've gotten the whole world, just like in the case of Hiranyakashipu, they're completely, totally dissatisfied. So this is where the Vedas are taking us, because sometimes when we hear the word sacrifice, it may feel like, why? Like, why do I need to sacrifice my own self-interest for the satisfaction of someone else? There is an inner resistance to this idea.
There's a lot of inner resistance.
There's a lot of inner resistance, but the idea being that in the satisfaction, in fact, we see that even in mundane psychology, we see that if someone is feeling unhappy or depressed, they recommend that go and do something for someone. Go serve some, serve the homeless, go, do this, do that. And the reason is because there's something in there, that understanding that if you do it something for someone, somehow that is going to make you happier than if we were just doing it for ourselves.
So even then, it's not completely sacrifice, because our ulterior motive is there that I will be satisfied and happy.
Right, and I guess one could say that that is probably a lower form of sacrifice, where even the act of sacrifice is meant for one's own happiness. But it's a good beginning, right?
It's a good beginning.
It's a good beginning, and then as we keep doing it, then the ultimate form of sacrifice is where there's absolutely no desire for any sense self-gratification.
That's
right, and that's what actually ultimately all the services that we are doing is actually meant to bring us to that point, right, where we just do it for the sake of the satisfaction of Guru and Krishna, nothing for myself.
So maybe we can hear from you guys. What are your thoughts on sacrificing to satisfy Krishna and to satisfy?
Prabhupada just says something really interesting. Can we just go back? Let's just share the screen one more time.
The last one.
Yeah, the last
paragraph is very powerful.
The whole world is engaged in sacrificing energy for advancement of learning, social upliftment, economic development, and plans for total improvement of the human condition. But no one is interested in sacrificing for the sake of the Lord, as it is advised in the Bhagavad Gita. Therefore, there is no peace in the world. If men at all want peace in the world, they must practice sacrifice in the interest of the Supreme Proprietor and Friend of all. So, if anyone has any thoughts on this, that we do carry so much of inner resistance to this idea, because somehow we still haven't bought into this idea of sacrifice, even though we may be practicing Krishna consciousness, and all the services we are doing actually is ultimately the purification or the refinement of this idea of sacrifice in it. We start out because we think this is going to give me happiness. It's going to maybe it's some kind of an ego stroking thing, right? That I do this, I can do this, I'm good at this, but then it's a whole journey.
It's a whole journey.
It's a whole journey, and unless and until we bring our energy to that, we will actually never get there. We'll continue to do things on that platform where it's all about I'm doing things, but it's ultimately meant for just my own selfish needs, interest, and concern. So we would like to hear from you, if you have any thoughts on this.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Yeah, actually, I was also thinking of it, like, when we say sacrifice for family, nation, but we still have something, we have that motive behind it, like what will I get out of, doing things for them. Then it always at back of mind, there is some selfish motive, although we call it as a sacrifice. And then I was reading Tanvi's book for microeconomics, and there also they say that there is an invisible hand. So although you want to fulfill your own desires, you are part of what they called it as a market. So in that also you have to be part of the whole chain, so that while fulfilling your own things, you are contributing to the overall social structure by which, and there is an invisible hand when it is positive. I just remembered that also. So they also talk about invisible hand there, which is Krishna's hand only.
Very nice point.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Radhika.
I was thinking that generally what happens is that if you talk to people who don't accept Guru, then the point that they bring up is that if they're able to do something, it's Krishna's will that I'm able to do it or I'm not able to do it. But a living Guru is so important because they can tell us that this is right and this is not right. And Guru is said to be heavy, right? So they can do the correction. But as conditioned living being, we actually resist that, right? So that resistance that we feel in our heart is it symbolizes that there is something which is not right, right? Otherwise, without the Guru, we can always say that, oh, I'm on the right path, and this is between me and Krishna. So, this importance of living Guru is so important, both Siksha Guru and Diksha Guru, because otherwise, we can always feel that I'm on the right path and there is no correction happening. And also all the other qualifications, even in spiritual life, there are so many people within devotional life also who are so well accomplished, so we can get confused in terms of their material abilities, right, that they have achieved so much, but then only a living guru can tell you that that accomplishment is from coming from a material platform or is it coming from a spiritual platform. So even though I'm saying all of that, I feel them to be just words, because but I think this is true, because otherwise there would be no resistance, and that friction that we feel in our heart is actually very purifying for us.
Yeah, very good points. And I guess that living gurus, they are the channel through which we get to satisfy the Supreme. That's how we find out whether what we're doing is a sacrifice or not.
That's true. Actually, just yesterday, I was reading Mana Siksha, and Maharaj was making this point that the way one actually subdues one's pride is by actually engaging in service to an advanced devotee, because that's the only way. Otherwise, it's like Radhikanam is pointing out very nicely that it's me, Krishna, and there's no one in between. So there's no question of being humble, right? Because we've already arrived there. So these are very good points, and I guess this is why Krishna consciousness is simple, but it's still hard because of all the selfish and prideful conceptions that we have to let go, which is very painful actually for a conditioned soul. So it's very nice. Thank you.
Anshul, go ahead.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Hare Krishna Prabhuji. So I have a question. I was thinking about the time and the attention that we give while we do chanting, hearing, and deity worship. So is the time and attention more important than doing these sacrifices in doing Havna and deity worship actually? So which one is more important?
Yeah, that's a very good question. That's why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave us this simple process of even chanting in today's day and age is a great sacrifice. It's a very difficult sacrifice, right? When we sit down to chant, our mind goes here and there, then we have to bring it back. That is a sacrifice. That is the highest sacrifice. To bring our attention to Krishna, to remember Krishna, that is the essence of all sacrifice. Because why are we doing chanting? Because it brings Krishna pleasure. And our mind is not used to giving somebody else pleasure. It wants to give pleasure to itself. It wants to think about oneself. So when we chant or when we offer some food to Krishna, we are doing it for his pleasure. When we are discussing Bhagavatam, we are not discussing Bhagavatam just to get some knowledge. We are actually discussing Bhagavatam, studying Bhagavatam so that it brings Krishna pleasure. And when Krishna is pleased, then we are also pleased. The symptom that we are pleased is comes from Krishna being pleased. So in whatever activity we do, if our pleasure, if our satisfaction doesn't last long in doing something, that means we haven't pleased Krishna completely. Otherwise, when Krishna is pleased with something, that satisfaction will last. It will not go away with time.
I really like your point. It's really entered into my heart actually when you were speaking. And it's true, right? That even though we may be doing something, but the intention of it, right? Are we doing it for Krishna's pleasure? And I think, Anchita, your question about comparing all these different kinds of sacrifice, it is very clearly actually in this age of Kali Yuga, the chanting of the holy names of Krishna, the Bhagavad process of hearing and chanting and then sharing or distributing it to others is actually considered to be the primary form of sacrifice. And deity worship is really meant to just keep us in a purified condition so that we can engage in hearing and chanting with greater attention. So, in previous ages, these 5 yajna was a form of recommended sacrifice. Deity worship was a form of recommended sacrifice for the age of Dwapar Yuga. But in Kali Yuga, the primary process is chanting, and one should put all of one's energy into chanting with full attention and giving it the highest priority. you know, even if it means that other things maybe have to take a little bit of a, you know, backseat. Like for example, our spiritual master, he always told us that, you know, keep your deity worship to 10 minutes, not more than that, so that you can, you know, use your energy for, you know, for hearing, chanting, and also distributing and sharing.
Yeah, the prime energy of the day should be given to chanting, and then deity worship comes.
And then reading.
Then reading.
So chanting and then reading, making sure that our daily quota of reading is not, you know, left untouched or unfinished. So because those two things are actually what will really, really put us on a very solid ground of Krishna consciousness. And then from that solid ground, then one can go out and we can also distribute. And of course, we also engage in deity worship, you know, and keep a standard that is sustainable with our family obligations and such. But yes, you know, these are the two things that are.
And Havanas are not at all recommended for this age. They're not practical. Lord Chaitanya never engaged in Havanas and never recommended them. But still, you will see that sometimes they are done in our temples, but just to, just again, to satisfy the Supreme.
Radhikana, go ahead.
I was remembering the series which I watched on Chanakya Pandit, and the very end episodes when what's the name of the prince? I'm forgetting the name of that. Chandragupta Maurya, right? So Chandragupta, he was basically at one instance he was feeling that what my guru is up to, right? Like he started doubting him at the very end, because he was feeling his policies are not matching with my value system. And then there's another disciple who was with Chanakya Pandit. He comes to him and he says that I was always very envious of you because you were very dear to your spiritual master, to the guru. But now I see that I don't feel any more envy in my heart, because I see that you didn't understand him at all, right? So that affection is, you received the affection, but you didn't understand him. I didn't get that kind of affection, but I understand him better. So I was thinking, and this has been my prayer for some time, we might not understand many things, right? Like, but at least how to be chaste and how to at least understand that I don't fall off the wagon unnecessarily because of my mind. And this happens because sometimes you might not be able to understand many things. So, and because Krishna is involved, so we are very safe. So just very theoretical points from my side. I think it's a long way for realization, but at least the success is lying here that we know. So
nice. Thank you. Yeah, the mind is actually very difficult.
Very tricky
And very difficult. And actually even Prabhupada, you know, he had a doubt when he saw Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur talk about, you know, killing a snake, right? And so Prabhupada had a doubt, and then of course he led Krishna at some point later when he read the Srimad Bhagavatam, he understood. So many things, you know, they're sometimes hard to understand. And you know, even actually when we look at the scriptures, I was thinking about it later. When we look at the scriptures, we have so many doubts about Bhishma. We have doubts about Drona. We have doubts about Maharaj Yudhishthir. We have doubts about everyone. We even have doubts about Lord Ramachandra. We definitely have doubts about Krishna. All these great personalities, you know, of course, there's some, you know, the Supreme Person is completely beyond any reproach. And yet, you know, this is the nature of the mind. You know, Sita Devi was not beyond any suspicion.
Yeah, right? I think it's the nature of the mind to be envious. And envy is always directed towards somebody who is greater than us. And it doesn't spare anybody. It doesn't, the fire of envy just even reaches up to Lord Krishna, Lord Rama. And so who can be spared?
Who can be spared?
So I guess when we receive envy from others, I guess we should understand that
it's our due.
It's our due.
It's our
if
due.
Krishna is getting it, then I will also get it.
And it also makes us realize what it feels like to be on the receiving end.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's what we are doing to Krishna. So everything we are receiving is actually very much our due and what we deserve, and then much, much more. Yes, day before yesterday, we heard this amazing lecture by Indradumna Swami, and he was making this point that how if you see this particular moon during the month of Bhadra, then one will actually experience great infamy. And then, you know, he was saying that how Srimati Radharani, she prays for that let me become infamous. So that, somehow or the other, Krishna will notice and he will, it's a very esoteric point. But the point being that a devotee really doesn't work for fame or infamy, right? He only works to please Krishna. So I think maybe we can continue.
Yeah, we can continue. But I guess this is a topic that think about it a little bit more. We can all think this point of sacrificing for Krishna's pleasure. How can I do that more and more? Tataste bhratara ime prajanam patayo nava ayajan vyaktam avyaktam purusham susamahitaha.
My dear son, therefore, your 9 brothers who are the masters of living creatures perform the sacrifice with proper rituals to satisfy both the manifested and non-manifested personalities.
So this is an interesting verse I found. Prabhupada explains it. The manifested personalities are the demigods like the ruler of the heavenly kingdom, Indra and his associates. And the non-manifested personality is the Lord himself. The manifested personalities are mundane controllers of the material affairs, whereas the non-manifested personality of God is transcendental, beyond the range of the material atmosphere. I guess it's easier to perform sacrifices for manifest personalities, where it's harder to do something for non-manifest. And I guess that's the struggle we face, that Krishna is not present. I can't see him. Now, how do I develop love for him? How do I develop? And therefore, I guess Krishna appears in manifest ways in the form of Guru, in the form of scriptures, in the form of devotees. Krishna is appearing so that we can, and in the form of deity, so we can approach Krishna in the holy name also. Those are all for us, those are the manifest personalities.
That's such a nice, I like this point, the manifest. And it's true, right? When he's non-manifest, that's why we don't, I mean, many times I've thought about it actually, that, in our front yard, we used to have these 2 tiny garden snakes. And initially I was a little like appalled, but like gradually I started like developing affection for them. And I would like open the door and I would sneak out to see, oh, are they still there? What are they doing? Are they out? Are they in the ground? And I was thinking that just like even two tiny, insignificant little, worm-like snakes can attract my attention. Why is it that Krishna, who's supremely attractive, does not attract my attention? Why don't I develop any affection for him? Why? This is a big question. Why?
Why?
What is it?
What is it?
Right? So maybe we can finish it with this.
30th bit. Tatascha manava kale ijire rishayo pare pitaro vibudhadetya manusya kartubhir vibhom.
Thereafter the Manus, the fathers of mankind, the great sages, the forefathers, the learned scholars, the Daityas and mankind perform sacrifices meant to please the Supreme Lord.
So you can see how this chain of sacrifice is coming down to us, started with Brahma, then with the Manus, the fathers of the mankind, the sages, everybody actually engages in this sacrifice. So it's not, when we engage in a sacrifice, we are we are following in their footsteps, and we are also satisfying these great personalities when we are engaging in sacrifice. When we follow in the footsteps of great persons and do what they are instructing us to do, we actually satisfy them. And from their satisfaction comes the satisfaction of the Supreme. That is the chain that is being revealed here.
The devotees of the Lord are ekanishta, are absolutely attached to the devotional service of the Lord. So we should stop here? Okay.
So we'll continue with text 31 on Thursday. So we'll take any reflections. Vishnurata,
Bhaktilata, or anyone. Raj, we haven't heard from you. Tarun, Amrita, Shweta. Yes, Anshulanjita, go ahead.
Just a quick question. I was just wondering. So the first time the sacrifices and all the ceremonies were performed by Lord Brahma to Krishna, Lord Krishna, right? And it was done to please Krishna, to play obeisances. So, and then it just everybody inherited that. Then at what point these sacrifices became like, what happened when these sacrifices became not to please the Lord but to gain things by not God loving but the God fearing and give and take? Like, was it because of the Vedas where special prayers were written, special methods were written to gain something very specific, or like it must have started somewhere. Does any like Bhagavatam or any other book talk about that? I just wondering, I mean, maybe off topic, but
yeah, this. So as I understand your question, when did these sacrifices become self-centered? Is that what it is?
yes.
Yeah. I guess the problem is twofold. I mean, the sacrifices are mentioned in the Vedas. In the first place, to attain something material. I mean, that's the. But at the same time, because people are attached to attaining something material, by doing that, they will gradually become purified and develop attachment to the Supreme. That's the indirect purpose of those sacrifices. So you will see that even in the days of yore, I mean, everybody was performing the sacrifices, but they would also perform the sacrifices to get something, like get a son or get a kingdom or this and that. But at the same time, they were guided by Brahmanas, so they would also proper Brahmanas, and they would also develop attachment to the Supreme. But I guess especially in the age of Kali Yuga, when the Brahmana class, the proper Brahmanas became absent, and the fall down of the Brahmanical culture, and now it's all like there is no bars, and there is no education about what is the purpose of these sacrifices, why are we doing it, and with the lack of proper knowledge and training and spiritual guidance, they have pretty much disappeared, or they have become deformed into just self-centered activities.
Yeah, I think that kind of sums it, I think it is the nature of the conditioned soul. The reason why we are in this Ekapad Vibhuti is because by our very definition, what is the definition of a conditioned soul? The conditioned soul is conditioned to think that by fulfilling the interest of the limited self, one can be happy. So, so the Vedas actually, they recognize that. And I was just remembering that Prabhupada says that a child will not take the medicine of sacrifice. So then, the father will put that medicine and wrap it inside a candy. So the candy is like that fruitive mindset. And then, because of that candy, the child will take the medicine also. So that's why in the Vedas, there's so many sacrifices mentioned, which seem like, oh, it's all about me. Okay, I'm going to do this yajna and just become this big person. But in reality, like you said, there's purification. But the ultimate form of sacrifice is when, there is no other desire for any sense gratification, but simply the satisfaction of the Supreme Presence. Even when we are chanting, actually we can catch ourselves that why are we chanting? Another aspect of selfless sacrifice is that when all motivations are taken away, one will still continue to do it. And that's like the litmus test of whether something is sacrifice or non-sacrifice. That if my happiness is taken away, if my fame is taken away, if people are not responding, and then what if not just that there is by omission, right? What if it's actually the opposite effect is happening? That by engaging in these acts of sacrifice, I'm actually becoming infamous. I'm getting blasphemed. I am experiencing the loss, like with Bali Maharaj, he lost everything.
And Haridas
Thakur, then how am I going to respond? So when things are withheld, or when things are not just withheld, but opposite reaction are happening, am I still, my heart is still open to that sacrifice? That's when I know that it's a sacrifice. Otherwise, it's just, what pleases my senses, what pleases my ego, what makes me feel like I'm big enough, strong enough, rich enough, intelligent enough, then I just do sacrifice. But still, all of these things are there just to bring us to that final point of complete self-surrender, Atmanivedana.
And I guess the practical point for us as practitioners is to, at every moment, refine our consciousness that, am I doing this for Krishna's? I want to do this for Krishna, I want to do this for your satisfaction. And Guru, I want to do this for your satisfaction. I guess that's a lifelong practice. It's not easy to give this self-centered mentality.
No, it's not.
It's not.
It's
easy.
the most
difficult thing to give.
Actually, just yesterday I was thinking about it. I was thinking that, oh my goodness, Krishna, like if I want anything else, then I can have that, but I won't have you. Because it's like, okay, you want this, okay, you can have this. But Krishna, actually Radhanath Maharaj also makes this point. So if you want credit, you can have credit, but you won't get Krishna.
And that's what Lord Chaitanya says in the Sikshastakam, na dhanam, na janam, na sundarim, kavitam, bhajagadishakamaya, right? I don't want this, I don't want that. I just want you, Krishna, your satisfaction. Tarunji, go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Mataji Prabhuji. My take from this today's discussion is that the process of sacrifice is very complicated, and just to make it simple, they take name of the Lord and keep chanting. That's the one. And I have one question or a doubt in my mind. The common sacrifices that we generally see in India is that we offer alms to the beggars, those gather around in the temples. But it is also said that if you really want to help someone, do not give him help directly, but teach him how he should earn his daily wages, etc. It is said that don't offer a fish, but then teach a person how to fish. So is it, and also it is said that if you offer alms to a child, particularly a young child, you make him a beggar for the lifetime. So is it okay to offer alms to the beggars, those who gather around the temples, or not?
Yeah, when you see this is like become a profession, begging sometimes becomes a profession. So in that situation, yeah, probably not best to engage in that, because then we promote the same thing. We enable them to be beggars for the rest of their life. But there might be situations in life when you see somebody genuinely in need of something, and then offering charity is a function of a grihastha. But the best charity is offered to people who are engaged in serving Krishna and who can actually benefit the society by spreading the knowledge of Krishna. That is the best form of charity.
Yeah, charity, I think this is a big discussion in the Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah.
What are the different kinds of charity and how do we, so the best charity, like you're saying, is actually, two things. One is, of course, distributing this knowledge, right? Giving the holy name, giving prashadam. So, when some devotees, what they do is they always carry some prashadam in their car or whatever, or some books in their car. And if someone comes and they're hungry, then they give them some prashad, so that is
money.
Rather, because that prashad is not just going to feed their stomach, but it's going to start them on their spiritual journey. And they'll be, because ultimately Krishna is the maintainer and the protector of all living entities. So just like what you said, that you can, instead of giving them fish, you teach them how to fish. Even better than that is that you connect them to the richest person in the universe. And once they do that, they don't need to, do this or that. They will be taken care of. And this may seem a little theoretical at this point, that, okay, how are they going to be taken care of just by connecting with Krishna? But that is the mystery of it. And Prabhupada says that, if you think about it, the ant is being maintained, and the elephant in South Africa is also being maintained. And even though they require tons of food, and the ant requires just a grain. So Krishna is the maintainer and the protector. And somehow, and the reason why they're in a poverty-stricken condition is because of some past karma. And we've actually seen that when people come in contact with Krishna consciousness, their whole material life situation, where they were homeless, they didn't even have a home to live, suddenly turns around. And they are able to then afford an apartment, they're able to take care of the family, they get a job. I mean, everything changes as soon as they take to the shelter of Krishna. So this is the best kind of sacrifice, is to help people connect with the Supreme Father, who is the richest person. And in the course of doing that, we can still provide them with food, clothing, and shelter.
Right.
Right.